EV sales are expected to keep growing in 2025, but despite interest in electrification, many car buyers remain unsold on all electric vehicles. Softening demand and increased competition in global markets like China have taken the luster off the EV trade in recent years. But with more affordable models and investment in charging infrastructure on the way, will electric vehicle stocks shine once again? On this IBD Explains, we talk the 2025 EV market outlook and what investors need to know. Here with me to break things down is IBD News editor Ed Carson. So, Ed, you watch Star Wars a lot. Yoda is saying always in motion is the future, but to know where we're going, we need to know where we've been first. So, can you talk a little bit about what's defined the EV market in 2024?
Yeah, I think there was a recalibration of expectations. There was definitely growth in the EV market, but I think that sales weren't as strong as maybe some of the automakers had anticipated, to start the year, or at least in late 2023. So there was some of that also weighed on pricing to a certain extent, which discouraged some of the big automakers from being as aggressive, especially in the US. But we are seeing growth, especially in China. We are seeing again, prices have come down, so it is more affordable. So I think that would be the still the trend going forward. But it's, looking back, if you didn't know that 2024 was supposed to be even stronger, you'd still be pretty satisfied if you were looking at the EV trends. But yeah, it was just a little less than people had thought.
It seems like automakers were overly optimistic about the adoption rates here. And can you talk a little bit about what demand looks like in 2025? And, we've also seen this real divergence between hybrids and all electric vehicles.
We are probably going to see some solid growth next year. Tesla will roll out some models. We'll talk about that later. There's a lot of models coming from China. Hyundai has a new US EV plant, so there should be growth in the US and around the world. Well, Europe maybe a little bit. Europe has its own issues beyond EVs, but generally there should be growth there. In 2024, one of the big things is that we saw plug-in hybrids grow much faster than all electric BEVs, as we call them. Partly that's because of certain automakers like BYD. They had new hybrid systems, and it's also because there's still range anxiety. And once you go beyond the early adopters, a lot of people are saying, well, you know what, I'm not comfortable. I don't want to wait, or I'm worried about running out of charge. So for whatever reason, plug-in hybrids and related cars like extended range EVs have taken off, and even some traditional BEV-only makers have shifted to say we're going to make some PHEVs, or EREVs, and that may swing back a little bit in 2025, but that's something that to know, like the plug-in hybrids are not going away.
And as you mentioned, Tesla, which is the popular EV stock amongst investors. And on the last company's earnings call, Elon Musk said that he expects to grow EV sales by 30% next year. So, what do they have in the pipeline?
Well, it looks like a pretty strong finish to 2024, so that'll be helping momentum. Just keeping that pace would be pretty positive for the year. Well, what they are supposed to do is that they're expected to roll out a refreshed version of the Model Y, and that is really important. The Model Y is probably the vast majority of its EV sales. So look, this one has to go right. The Model S, Model X, and Model 3 didn't really generate a lot of sales, even though there were real improvements. I think part of the issue is that cosmetic changes to the exterior were so cosmetic, it's hard to tell them apart. If the Model Y just has any kind of changes where you say, aha, that's different, maybe that'll be the difference. Because people have said the Model 3, the refreshed Model 3 is a lot better, as a driving vehicle and all these things. So that's big. And then the other one is an affordable EV. Now, we don't really know what this is. This is supposed to come out in the first half of 2025. Now, we haven't even seen pictures of it yet. And given Tesla's timeline, which sometimes drags on, it delays, the fact that they think that they can get it out so quickly suggests it's not going to be that different from a Model 3 or Model Y. Maybe it'll be a hatchback, or maybe there'll be little differences, maybe a smaller battery pack. We don't really know. In the US, that will have the advantage of the $7,500 tax credit, which will be important, assuming that credit is around. It will face a lot of competition in China and Europe. Tesla has never really introduced a vehicle that wasn't sort of open. I mean, the Model 3, there weren't really not many vehicles like that. The Model Y, not many crossovers, and the Model S and X, well, those are even older. the Cybertruck is its own thing. I mean, I know it's a truck, but I mean, come on, it's its own thing. A small EV, there's lots of small EVs out there, especially in China and Europe. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But they could grow that much. They could grow better. They may not, they may not. It also depends on prices and tax credits.
And as you mentioned, China is such a key market in all of this, and that competition is really intense there. So, can you talk a little bit about what role China will play and what are some of the players to watch?
I mean, China is the world's biggest auto market. It's the world's biggest EV market. So, and over half of new sales are EVs, hybrids, however you want to like. This new energy vehicle. So that adoption has gone enormously there. BYD is by far the biggest player. It's the world's largest EV maker if you include hybrids, and it's basically neck and neck, and it probably will pass Tesla in the fourth quarter of 2024 for BEVs. So that one has been growing like crazy. You also have a lot of other players. There's Xpeng, there's NIO. They have some new models out. Li Auto, they've got some issues, but they're a big player. There's this cell phone maker. We talked about Apple trying to make an Apple car. Well, there is one of the apples of China, Xiaomi. They did make a car and it's doing very well. And they're going to have another one. They're going to make a crossover that will compete against the Model Y. So there's a lot of buzz about that. There's a lot of cars, Leap Motor. I mean, there's a lot of companies we don't even know about. So there's a lot of growth there. And also there's going to be a lot of exporting. I'd say especially by BYD. They now have a plant in Thailand. They will have a plant in Brazil very soon. They have more of these car transporting ships, these ro-ro ships. So you're going to see them exporting a lot of cars, especially hybrids, to Australia, to Latin America, to Europe. So that'll be a lot of growth. So that'll be a big thing in there. So those will be factors for China, and just a lot going on there. It is a very difficult market to compete in.
And as you mentioned, one of the things that Tesla does benefit from here in the US are those EV tax credits. But we have a new administration coming in, and President elect Donald Trump has hinted that he doesn't really like EVs or that EV tax credit. So, can you talk a little bit about what investors can maybe expect there?
Yeah, I mean, it is really, we don't know. One is that to get rid of the EV tax credit, that would have to go through Congress. I mean, there's little tweaks that you could do this or that to, but couldn't really change that. So it's possible you could get Congress to repeal just that part of it. It doesn't seem like you could repeal all of the green tax credits from IRA, just from looking at the political landscape. But if you did that, that would be a possibility. We don't know. For Tesla, there would be a short-term hit. I mean, for sure. I mean, they'd lose, that would be more. The long-term benefit might be that you discourage other automakers from making their own EVs. So long-term, maybe, but that's balancing out. But that's offset to a certain extent. California says, we're going to do our own EV credits and we'll exclude Tesla from them. I mean, they've got reasons for it, market share, or you could do their strings. So that would do it. Another thing that Trump has talked about is, or Trump's team has talked about, is maybe rolling back some of the emission rules or mileage rules. That would also be something where, on the one hand, that would just it wouldn't affect Tesla because all their vehicles are EV and zero emission, but it might discourage automakers from producing EVs. However, there's the flip side is that states like California already have zero emission mandates coming up. So to what extent do automakers really pull back when you have to compete in all these other markets, and the knowledge that the next time a Democrat comes in, they'll probably push those credits, those rules back in. Also, Tesla gets a lot of zero emission credits. A lot of the money, a lot of its profit is from GM and others saying, we don't want to make EVs, we'll buy some credits off of you, Tesla. So to the extent that they don't need to buy as many, that would hurt Tesla. So there's a lot of cross currents. I don't know how much will actually happen or how much will actually influence it. But that is a wild card. And it's probably really negative for something like a Rivian, which makes only EVs. And that would be it. But it's hard to know how it would shake out for Tesla and the traditional automakers.
Another wild card with this administration is proposed tariffs. How would that impact the market?
Well, I mean, if tariffs already are crazy high on China, so no Chinese EV makers are shipping cars here, so that's not an issue. If he does tariffs on the U.S., and that could be things because there's plants or parts that are made in Mexico, so that could affect other automakers, maybe help Tesla. The the super wild card beyond all wild cards is, what if Trump says, okay, we want China EV makers to invest here, build up your plants here. And he has said that during the campaign. So it's possible he would do that. Biden administration didn't want that, but I can assure you that if Trump said, you build here, BYD would be very quick to jump on that. They already make buses in the US outside of LA. So that would be the ultimate wild card uh, that that would shake things up. But again, we just don't know how that's going to play out.
And Ed, you mentioned this range anxiety as one of the roadblocks for, greater consumer adoption of EV vehicles. And we've had a lot of investment in charging infrastructure, but it doesn't really seem to be moving those charging stocks. So, what are your thoughts on that area of the market?
Yeah, there's a lot of money to spend. You have to building up these charging stations, and you have to get people to come to them. And the charging stations often don't work. It is aren't great. And let's face it, one of the clear advantages Tesla has, especially in the US, is the superchargers. Now they've opened that up to everybody else, but that means it discourages others from setting up. I mean, it's you can set up it's that Tesla doesn't own that standard, so others can make charging stations for that standard, but it does discourage uh, companies from setting up doing that. So it just seems like for whatever reason those aren't big right now, and especially these standalone players. It's a lot of money. You just get a little trickle back, in subsidies, and those just haven't played out particularly well.
So, then what should investors be watching for with the EV trade in 2025?
Well, I mean, just strictly Tesla, which has been hitting new highs, but a lot of that isn't so much on the EVs. I mean, there's some optimism that growth is returning, but obviously its valuation clearly is about a lot of other things like self-driving and Optimus and other things that aren't directly related to EVs. So that's something out there. Yeah, I think you just want to see how that demand, which ones of these play out. Does the growth for these various companies pick up? Does Tesla really roll out and have hits with these, new and refreshed models? Does BYD just continue its, monster growth rate? Or does it start coming under pressure with all the competition at home for him, for BYD? Do traditional automakers, push forward? GM was finally starting to make some EVs and something approaching volume. Will they actually ramp that up? Will Hyundai become a real competitor in the US? There's a lot going on. I think that you'll start seeing is that which ones are really going to take hold in a steady but not mammoth growth environment in 2025 and probably beyond.
All right, Ed. Well, thanks so much for your insights today. We appreciate it.